So, where did this all start? Approximately 2 years ago, we had a strategic planning process. About 50 individuals from the community, board members, teachers, business owners, parents, grandparents, and even students were involved in the process. And it was strictly done to see where does the community want Utopia ISD to be in the next 5 to 10 years. What should we focus on? So the individuals that met that day, one of the things that they talked about was facilities. And they wanted to have a tour of the facilities. So we took one day and we took a couple hours and we went through the facilities. And so there were some people that were part of a subcommittee that stepped aside and they started working on facilities and where they wanted to be and what they wanted to see and what they wanted to happen. Some of the original members of that committee were Tony Cantu, Karen Heidemann, Chad Hillis, Wayne Moore, and Gina Smothers. So if you want kind of a history of, well, what happened, when did y'all meet, what did you talk about, what were some of the steps in that, they can get very detailed. We're going to cover it very quickly tonight. Won't spend a lot of time on that, but if you want to delve more into that, those individuals can help you find out more information. So, one of the things that they started doing was looking at access needs at the existing facilities. They wanted to identify some of the deficiencies and the inequities at the existing campuses. What did some buildings have that some buildings didn't have? What were some kids able to access that other kids weren't able to access? They wanted to review the financial data of the district. How are we operating month to month? And we'll talk about that a little bit more later on. What does a yearly budget look like? How much money is being spent on maintenance? How much money is being spent on education? Those types of things. And then to try to understand the financial capacity of the district. We spent a lot of time talking about where do tax dollars come from? How do we get tax dollars? How do we fund the local school district? How do we pay for teacher salaries? That type of thing. And then they wanted to study the academic needs of our programs. Well, there was actually another committee, a subcommittee, that their whole job was to look at where are we in Utopia ISD, what do we currently offer, what do we want to offer. We would love to be as big as Northside Independent School District or Dallas or Houston, where we can offer everything out there. But we don't have the facilities, we don't have the manpower, and bottom line, we don't have the money. So what are the careers, what are the jobs, what do we want to prepare the kids for whenever they graduate from high school? And then, of course, we put the steering committee together, and then we looked for community input. We did conduct several tours of the school. They were done on the weekends, they were done at night, they were done during the course of the day. We put those out for the public to know when they were going to occur, and we did tours. And we started on one end of the campus and we went all the way to the other end of the campus. And there were talking points that the committee came up with, and we discussed each one of those talking points as we went through the campus. The committee then looked at prioritizing what are the most important things that we need to look at, what are the most important things that need to be taken care of first. And then how do we address it? How do we go about, can we use local funds that we get from year to year to take care of some of this stuff? Is there grant money out there that we can get to take care of some of it? How are we going to finance? Then they presented their findings and they made a recommendation to the board. Along the way, we were getting grants. We applied for some safety grants. We applied for some technology grants. And we did a lot of work along the way. And we can discuss those later on. Some of them are in the flyers and the handouts we've got for you, the things that we've done so far. And we've probably come up with about $1 million in grants already. So we've done due diligence to try to find money out there where it didn't affect the local taxpayer directly. And then the board studied the recommendations to determine what they were going to do. What action were they going to take? And then obviously, you know, on August the 14th, at the regular board meeting, the board called for a bond. I have to stress to you, there has been a tremendous amount of discussion. The steering committee met on an average of once a month. They would meet anywhere from an hour to an hour and a half. They did more tours, they looked at more studies. We had a facility study that was done by an independent individual or an independent company, and they looked at all the things that needed to be improved or taken care of on the campus. So what were some of the things that they were concerned about? Safety and security was one of the biggest things. And when they first started talking, they said, look, we don't have time to be messing around for the safety. Obviously, we all know what happened a year ago in Uvalde. We've got to get these things taken care of as fast as possible. So that's when we went to work writing grants. All the fencing that was put around the school was paid for with grants. All the cameras were paid for with grants. All the security things that we've done so far, the electronic doors, all of that was paid for with grant money. We didn't use any local funds whatsoever. And we've still got a little bit of grant money left, and we're still upgrading and adding different components to each one of those. Then the next thing was the aging facilities. Things are getting a little bit older. They don't have the capacity that they used to have. Education is getting a little different. We still like the traditional learning. We want to make sure that the kids are learning their 3 R's and that they're doing well in school. But there's some other things out there that we need to be preparing them for. And then that brought us to career readiness. Not everybody's going to go to college. Not everybody wants to go to college. Not everybody should be forced to go to college. So what can we offer at Utopia, Texas to prepare students so that when they leave high school, they can either go to college, they can go into the military, or they're ready to go take on a career immediately into the workforce to be able to make a living, be a productive member of society. So that's when they looked at what the other committee was doing and the things that they recommended. And a couple of things that they recommended were the ag pathway, animal science specifically, and ag engineering, also what we used to call welding. Those were the 2 big ones. And then the kids were very insistent on technology. They wanted a technology pathway where they could learn to do things with computers, take them apart, program them, troubleshoot, run networks, that type of thing. So those were the 3 main things that we focused on. When it came back to the aging facilities, some of the big concerns were asbestos and ADA compliance. You can see in the picture on the left-hand side, that's a picture in the main building that was constructed in 1927. That's the tile floor that was put in. You can see that it's cracking and that the slab is moving and shifting. And so we thought, well, let's go in there and let's put in new tile. Well, when we looked at the age of the tile, and I was able to pull off of the shelf, there was an asbestos management plan on the shelf in a binder. And I pulled that off of the shelf and I said, well, we've got an asbestos management plan here. Hasn't been updated in a while, but we need to check and make sure that we're not doing anything illegally or going to endanger anybody. So we had a company come out and they tested, and sure enough, all the black mastic that's under the tile and around the base, the cove mold or the boat molding that goes around the base, all of that black mastic contains asbestos. So to remove that asbestos, we would have to have an abatement company come in, remove the asbestos, and then put the tile down. Couple of problems with that. Number one, it was extremely expensive. Number two, you have to completely enclose the building in a plastic sheathing that completely closes it off. And then the tile has to be taken out and the asbestos has to be taken out. Those companies will not guarantee you how long it'll take. They'll tell you an estimate, they'll give you an approximate amount of time, but they can't tell you exactly how long it'll take. They'll also tell you that we can give you an approximate start date. So like if we wanted to start the day after school was out, we want to be ready for the next year, we can get in line and hopefully they'll get to us, but they could not guarantee. Depends on how long the previous job takes, and then it depends on how long this job takes, and if they run into any other asbestos when they start pulling out the tile and the mastic. The other thing was the ADA compliance. You can see here, this is the door that goes into the restroom. That's actually a picture of the boys' restroom entrance there. It's approximately 24 inches wide. It is not ADA compliant. That is the only restroom in the main building for students. The special ed room does have one restroom that they use for their special ed students, and there is another restroom in the teacher's workroom, lounge, kitchen. But again, none of them are ADA compliant. As you can see in the background, the sink back there is not ADA compliant because a wheelchair can't get up underneath there for somebody to be able to wash their hands. Then this is the restroom that is in what I call the practice gym. Some of you may call the original gym, the old gym. You can tell there has been very little maintenance that has been done since the new gym or the competition gym was built. So this is the men's restroom. Both urinals have been taken off the wall. This sink is still operational. The sink to the right is no longer operational. The doors on the other side has been taken or fallen off. The toilets are wobbly on the floor. We've had leaks in this building. We'll talk about it more a little bit later, but as the heaters have gone out in that building, they were never replaced. So we actually lost the last heater about a year and a half ago, and we put in a heater that's not big enough to heat the whole place, but it's big enough to keep it above freezing whenever we get the freeze. Because we did freeze in this building, and the pipe that goes up in the attic here froze, and this whole area was flooded. The other restroom on the girls' side is very similar in condition. The other concern was the fire hazard. Originally, when the building was built, there was an attic with a roof above it. I'm not 100% sure on the story. There's a couple of gentlemen in here who are former superintendents that can probably inform us a whole lot better than what I've been able to find out. But it was my understanding that that roof started leaking and was leaking pretty bad, and they weren't able to shut the school down to put on a new roof, and they just put a pitch roof above it, and so that created a second attic above, which we have limited to no access to. I have not been able to find a way into that particular attic. Then later on, the central air and heat was put in. And when the central air and heat was put in, a hanging roof, or ceiling rather, was put in. And so that created a third attic. You can see here, there's debris throughout each one of the attics. I assume it was left behind because they couldn't get it out during construction, or there was some repairs that were made, or whatnot. I have been told by the local fire department that if this building were to catch on fire, that they would not enter that building because they don't know where the fire is, which attic it might be in, and what's burning, and what might fall and what might not fall. There is also no central alarm system that is tied to the other buildings. There was no central alarm system whatsoever until about 2 years ago. We purchased a wireless smoke detecting system in that building, and we placed one of those smoke detectors in the resource building and one of them in the ag room, so that if they go off in the main building, We have a couple of people that will be able to hear them in other buildings and set off the main alarm so that we can evacuate the school. But there is no wired system, there's no fire suppression system. We do have smoke detectors, and they are wireless. And we do check the batteries to make sure that they are all right, that they work correctly. You can obviously see that people have tried to get up into this second attic up here, and they've been stepping on the vent or the ductwork up in the attic. And as people have worked up there, they've just left things behind, and nobody's come up in there to clean. The other thing is our 1,000-gallon propane tank was sitting behind the competition gym, and it gets tested annually by the local propane company, and they test the pressure to make sure that there's no leaks. 2 years ago, they tested it, and there was a leak somewhere. So those pipes run underground, and we tried to trace the piping to try to replace that piping, and there are so many pipes underground that we couldn't figure out where it went. So we moved that tank and put it between the practice gym and the main building. There was enough room there that we could legally place it there. And then we ran a new pipe into the main building, and then we ran a flex pipe in the attic of the new building, and it is within code. The piping is done correctly, and it is strapped in like it's supposed to be, but we did have to rerun all that piping and all the T's and everything to get propane to where it needed to be. We took and put an extra propane tank or an additional propane tank on the practice gym for the one heater that's in there. It has to be filled. If it's cold enough that that heater runs, that tank has to be filled approximately every 48 to 72 hours. So the propane company has to come every 48 to 72 hours to fill it. We can't put a bigger tank there because of the distance away from the building. We can't get far enough away from the building without getting in the road. So the Railroad Commission won't let us put anything bigger than the 120-gallon tank that's there. The plumbing and the electrical and the infrastructure is maxed out. It's reached its capacity in the main building. You can see here some of the plumbing that has been done through the years as we've had to fix things. The walls have had to be knocked out because the plumbing is inside the cinder block. So we have to knock that out. The problems we're running into is that when we get back here, the original piping was not PVC. It was galvanized. So that galvanized pipe has rusted on the inside and calcified and rusted on the outside. So when we go to try to tie into it, we've typically had to cut it with a Sawzall or something, and then we put a sleeve over it, a compression sleeve, so that we can join it with PVC. So there's no true joint that's put on there with threads. And you can see here where the slab is in pretty bad shape. It's not as sturdy or secure as it used to be. It started to crumble in a lot of places. We have a sewer system that was abandoned a few years ago. I was told that the slab collapsed on the sewer system or on the lines, and so they abandoned the two restrooms. It's my understanding that the tank and the lateral lines are still outside, but have never been removed. We have two other sewer systems, one in the back that services the special ed room, and then one in the front that services the kitchen and the toilet. Both of those tanks are immediately outside the building, and the lateral lines run underneath the asphalt. So, if you know anything about sewer systems, the water's supposed to come up and the grass is supposed to use the water and help it evaporate and whatnot, and that keeps it from going down into the ground and going into the water supply. So we've had some problems with those. We've had to have one tank pumped twice, I believe, and the other one, the line had to be repaired going from the building to the tank. It was quite an extensive repair there. You can see here that our electricity is maxed out. You can see that we had to put a circuit breaker here These are the lights in the original gymnasium. And when they put the lights in, they put a main circuit breaker, came over here, and then they came down and put in light switches to turn on the lights. The metal halide lights that are in both gymnasiums, I had a lighting engineer come out, and he informed me that those halide lights, as soon as they're put in, they start to dim. There's a ballast up there, and every time you turn them on, they're a little bit dimmer, a little bit dimmer, a little bit dimmer. And the ballast is extremely expensive, and they don't want to sell you a ballast anymore. They want you to go to LED because it's much more efficient and much more economical. So we have not replaced any of the lights in the practice gym. We are looking at replacing the lights in the competition gym because we've had 2 of those metal halide lights go out and 2 more of them that are dimming very quickly. We hope to have that done by the end of 2023. And then you can see the electricity through the years, and here's some cabling for the old televisions and the old internet system. That's still up there, and those wires are all tied into the lumber here. I did not get right up against this, but as closely as I could tell, there is some rotting that's going on, and so we're going to have to replace some boards or do something, because at some point all that's going to pull loose, and we've already had some wires that have come down. So those were some concerns about the buildings. The main building was the primary concern, and I think we discussed the main things in the main building that create some concern. One other thing that I will mention, Texas Education Agency has regulations. They're not laws, but they have regulations on classroom sizes. They're considerably larger than the classroom sizes that we have. Obviously, we don't put 35 students in a classroom. That doesn't happen in Utopia ISD. We do have classes of 26, 27 in a classroom, and it gets pretty tight in those classrooms. Almost all the classrooms in the main building are much smaller than TEA recommendations and regulations. And obviously, if you only have 9, 10 students in a classroom, it's probably plenty big enough for a teacher to be able to instruct in that classroom. But you start getting into 20 to 27 kids, it starts getting pretty tight in some of those classrooms. So that was a concern as well. So the next topic is bonding capacity. So the board had to look at, and the committee had to look at, what is our capacity? Say we want to build something. How much money can we borrow or sell bonds, is what we use in municipalities and school districts. We say we sell a bond, which is basically like going and taking out a home loan. What is our capacity? So how do we calculate that? What do we look at? First of all, we look at M&O, maintenance and operations. There's 2 taxes in a school district. One is M&O, one is INS, or interest and sinking. M&O is what we operate on from day to day, year to year. That's what you as taxpayers have been paying in Utopia, Texas for many years. We operate on a yearly basis. We pay teacher salaries. We do minor maintenance. It is not designed to do major maintenance. We had 2 air conditioners that went out this last year in the main gym, or actually a year ago. If you were at graduation, you know it was about 86 degrees. And 2 years ago, that is. It's already 2023. In 2022, it was about 86 degrees for graduation in the gymnasium. We had those 2 air conditioners that went out. It cost approximately $150,000 to replace those 2 air conditioners. We did not have any interest in sinking. We had to use our maintenance and operation, and we ate up every penny we had plus some. Now understand, Utopia ISD is in a very good situation. They have a fund balance. So there was some money there that we could use to be able to take care of that problem. But you can't keep using and living on that from year to year to year to year to take care of your maintenance problems. So your maintenance and operations takes care of the yearly stuff. Your interest in sinking is a bond. That's what you use to pay the loan back. Something I want to make real clear. Maintenance and operations. When you pay maintenance and operations taxes, the state of Texas has some say-so as to how much they're going to send you and how much the local taxpayers are going to pay. And if you're getting too much money, all of you have probably heard of the Robin Hood Act from several years ago, they start taking money back. And it's another long story and a long explanation. I'm happy to stay afterwards and explain it. But our Central Appraisal District is appraising our property here, and the comptroller at the state is appraising our property here. So the comptroller says, well, you should be collecting taxes here. So we're going to fund you as if you're collecting this much in taxes. But we're actually collecting this much. And TEA says, we don't care. You should have collected this much. Well, the local Central Appraisal District is the one that is appraising the property. So we collect taxes on this. We receive funding from the state of Texas on this. All this money in between, we should have collected, but we did not. So the state of Texas says, you should have collected it. It's your fault. So send us some money back. So this past year is the first time that we have been to what's called a recapture district. We are having to send back approximately $160,000 to the state, which we don't have. Again, our fund balance is very good. It'll be able to take care of that, and hopefully those values will level off, and we won't have to continue to do that. But that's the situation that we're in with maintenance and operation. Interest in sinking. The state cannot touch a penny. The local people own that money. Your local school board gets to decide on how every penny is spent. The state of Texas, the federal government, nobody can come in and tell you, well, you got to send us some back, or you got to loan money over here, or you got to. No, it belongs to the students and the people of the school district. So anytime you pay an interest in sinking, every penny goes to the local school district. Nowhere else. That's the only school tax that does that. So the M&O rate historically in Utopia was pretty steady for a while. In 2005, it was $1.40 per $100 of evaluation. So let's just pretend like you had a piece of property that was valued at $100. You would pay $1.40 in school taxes. M&O, not INS, M&O. As property values go up, the rates go down. TEA sets the rate for our school district. Your local board adopts that rate, but they have no say in what that rate is going to be. The state of Texas basically says, you operated on $2 million last year, we're going to let you have $2,050,000 this year. Obviously, that's not enough to keep up with inflation. But what they're saying is we're going to take the property value, we're going to calculate what the rate should be for you to be able to collect that same amount of money, and that's your rate. That changed about 4 or 5 years ago. Used to, the local district calculated their own rate. It was a long few pages. I got a couple of superintendents in here that can probably remember that document. And it took forever for you to fill that out. Now, TEA does all of that. And they say, Utopia ISD, this is your rate. And this is all the money you're allowed to collect. That's it. You can't collect any more funds. So you can see that from 2007 all the way to 2018, the tax rate stayed at $1.04. That was before TEA set the tax rate. They began setting the tax rate, and this was what happened. In 2019, it went from $1.04 to 0.97. 2020, 0.9653, and all the way down to this last year, was 0.8846. All of you remember getting those appraisal values in May? They were way up here, right? They were really high. Well, TEA took a look at those and they said, and I know this is hard to believe, but they looked at them and they said, they're not high enough. Property in your area is selling for more than what the Central Appraisal District is appraising you at, so we're going to assign you values. So they assigned us values. So this next year, your values went up, so your rate has to go down. So this last year, you paid 0.8846. This year in 2023, I just sent the letters last week to all the tax assessor collectors. Your tax rate will be 0.6692 for every $100 of value. So you can see it's gone down almost 22 cents. 21.54, I believe it was, or 56. Okay? You will not pay, if the bond passes, you will not pay on the bond. That tax rate will not take effect until November of 2024. So that's what you're going to pay this year is 0.6692. That rate. If that rate stays the same, which historically property values have gone up. So if property values go up, your M&O is going to go down. The rate will go down. But just say, let's say it doesn't go down. Let's say property values stay static and the rate doesn't go down. The rate next year in November with a 0.6692 M&O and a 0.5 INS would be 1.1692. So those of you that are like me that like to see it in a graph form, that's what it looks like. So we go all the way back to 2006. Your tax rate is still less than what it was in 2006. Obviously, the total tax rate is higher between 2007 and 2023. All right? So, where do these assessed values come from? Most people that come to these meetings and most people that are talking, it's their homes. Homesteads. People who this is where they live. They have a homestead there. Their house and 1 acre. All right? The others are utilities. We don't have a lot of that in Utopia ISD. Go down the road to Canepa. They have a bunch of it. Solar farms. They get a lot of money from utilities. Commercial. That's where we're manufacturing something. That gets taxed. And the way I understand it is the business itself doesn't get taxed, but the property and how much the property would generate if it were leased or rented, that's what they pay taxes on. Manufacturing, a little bit different, but very much like commercial. You're actually manufacturing something. Agriculture, that's a big one in our school district, but remember, you don't pay taxes on the market value of an agricultural piece of property. You pay the agricultural value, and we'll look at one of those here in just a little while. And then obviously minerals. Go to Rock Springs, Texas. They get a tremendous amount of mineral money. They went out for a bond this last year. The bond did not pass. I called up there and I said, what's your tax rate? What do you bring in? What are you sending back for recapture? They make a tremendous amount of money on minerals. They send back to the state last year, they sent back to the state $2.2 million. Yet they have to go out for a bond to be able to build a new building. Remember, the INS is untouchable by the state and the federal government. M&O, give me it back, or give it to me. They never had it to begin with. So they're just wanting it. You ask, where does that money go? If somebody finds out, please let me know. I have asked all kinds of people, show me where that recapture money is going. Nobody has been able to show me where it's going. In this next legislative called session in October, one of the things that's being pushed for is open records. Show us where that money is going. So, how does that look in Utopia ISD? 16.1%. These are new numbers. Some of you might have heard some other numbers. Mr. Lestraps, who is in the audience today, he does the finances and he's done all these calculations for us and made sure that we're doing everything legally on the financial side. And he collected some numbers. 16.1% of the value is resident homestead. That's people that own a home and an acre of land and have a homestead. All the other comes from all these other categories: utilities, commercial, manufacturing, agriculture, minerals. People who may not live here, but they own a home or they own land. People who invest in property. All of that is included in the 83.9%. We've talked about this extensively already. This slide right here, they're determined by local appraisal values. That's what we collect our money on. The comptroller comes in and says, you're too low. You should be collecting up here. As the values go up, the tax rate goes down. As the values go down, the tax rate goes up. We have not seen this in my lifetime. Property in the 50s was selling around here anywhere from $25 to $50 an acre. Now it's anywhere from $25,000 to $50,000 an acre. So what has appraised value looked like in Utopia ISD? We go back over here to 2025. Started out down here. It has gone all the way up to here. This is the last number. Where it can go in 2024, we don't know. Where it's going to go in 2025, I don't know. 2026, I don't know. We're trying to predict the future, and there's no way to predict the future. It took a pretty drastic jump here in 2019, and then it took another pretty drastic jump in 2023. So the legislature, this last biennium, at the first legislative session, there were a couple of laws that came out pertaining to education, finance, and property values and taxes. Number one is reduce the public schools maintenance and operation tax rate. Remember we said we went from 0.8846 to 0.6692. That was one of their big pushes, was to try to get that rate down. So they compressed. It's called a compression. They compressed the rate. And ours went from 0.8846 to 0.6692. And there's your exact number. Went down by 0.2154 or 21.54 cents for every $100 of value. That's going to help decrease your school tax dollars for any increase in the value. One more time. Value goes up, rate goes down. The other thing was a piece of legislation that you, the voter, get to vote on in November. It's increasing the homestead exemption from $40,000 to $100,000. So let's say you had a home that was valued at $250,000. Last year you paid taxes on $210,000 because you could deduct $40,000. Now that does not include over 65. We'll talk about that in a minute. That does not include disabled veteran discounts or exemptions or any of that. That's just homestead. If this proposal passes, and this is what it looks like on the ballot, if we have more fors than against, and this passes, the homestead exemption will go up to $100,000. So that same $250,000 home that you pay $210,000, or you pay taxes on $210,000, this next year you will pay taxes on $150,000 instead of the 210. Yes, we have actually run the numbers. Some property, not all, in no way, shape, or form are we saying that, but there is some property out there that will actually pay less tax dollars this next year, even if we were to add the 50 cents this year, than what you paid last year. And the 50 cents will not be added this year. It will only be added next year if the bond is approved. That is a possibility. And we've run the numbers on some people, and we've seen some people that their taxes have gone down. Their tax dollars, the bottom amount that you pay. So what's your bonding capacity? You take the 50 cents, you multiply it times the total number of dollars of value. That gives you an amount that you collect in a year's time. You kind of work it backwards. And you say, okay, well, if I'm making a 6-month payment twice a year, and I'm collecting this much money, what's the maximum that I can borrow at whatever rate, and I can still make that payment? That's bonding capacity. As you pay off the bond, if you have the authorization, you can go and take out additional bonds to be able to borrow additional dollars. So if you take out a bond for $30,000, and you don't have to take it out all at once, you can take out $1 million to get all the drawings done and all the preliminary stuff done, and you can take out another $2 million, and then another $5 million, and you only pay as you're going. You don't pay on the whole amount. It's much like a home loan. You will pay on what you take out in bonds as you take it out. But let's say at the end of 2 years you've taken out $30 million. And then you pay on it for another 5 or 6 years, and the voting public has authorized you to take out $50 million total. Then you can go back, you've paid off, say, $10 million, you can go back and you can take out another 10. Now you've borrowed a total of 40. You're building towards the maximum that you can take out. That's your bonding capacity. You can never take out more than what you can pay. All right? With the approval of the Utopia ISD voters, the district will be granted the authorization to, in the amount not to exceed $58 million. Currently, with the values that we have at 50 cents, our bonding capacity is at approximately $28 million. Then why in the world are you asking for $58 million? Reason being, every time you go back to the poll or you go back to the people and say, we'd like more, we'd like to have an additional capacity to take out more. Number one, every election that Utopia ISD holds, doesn't matter whether there's every county that we are in, it costs us about $10,000 just to hold the election. So if you take out another one, that's another 10. You ask for another one, that's another 10. You ask for another one, that's another 10. So you're asking for $10,000 every time you go to the polls. The other thing that the board talked about and the committee talked about is, do we want to keep coming back to the people and saying, well, we need some more, we need some more, we need some more? Are they going to get tired of say, why didn't you just make plans for the long term, ask us one time, tell us what you plan to do, and then let's go to the polls and vote one time and say yes or no? And ultimately, that's what the board decided. They wanted to go one time, tell everybody what the plans were, knowing that In no way, shape, or form are the drawings or location or anything else 100% decided. But these were the main things that we needed. And that's what we're going to look at here in a minute. And that's why the board has put a $58 million bond in front of the voters. We can't take out $58 million right now. We don't have that capacity. We have about 28 at the moment. So what does this mean for the taxpayer? These are actual numbers. These are real numbers. Mr. Lestrap has been very generous. He drove all the way from the Panhandle and came down here tonight so that he can answer your financial questions. And we're going to put him in a corner, and you can corner him and talk to him all night long if you would like to. He's the expert. He ran these numbers. The average homestead in Utopia ISD is $239,888. That's the average homestead. Obviously, there's homesteads valued lower, there's homesteads valued higher. But we're going to look at the average. The average homestead with a $40,000 deduction at a rate of 0.8846 last year, their annual Utopia ISD tax bill, and remember, if you get a tax bill, it's going to have several different taxes on there. You're going to have road and bridge, the ESD, there'll be several of them. But if you find just the school district, you pay the school district $1,768.21 a year. Monthly, that was $147.35. If you were going to pay the 50 cents this year on top of the 0.6692, that same homeowner with the same value with a $100,000 exemption at a tax rate of 1.1692 would pay $1,635.57 for the year. Monthly, they would pay $136.30. Their taxes, the amount, the bottom line, would actually decrease by $132.64 for the year. And it would decrease by $11.05 each month. That works out, and I'll have to corner Mr. Lestrapes here in a minute, but I think it was at $278,000, somewhere right in that range, is where it basically zeroed out, and it stayed stagnant. Obviously, if your house is valued at $300,000 or $400,000, you can see here how much it's going to increase for the year. $194.86, $292.30. That's $3.20 monthly and $26.92 monthly. All right. So also Mr. Lestrapes wrote a program. It's on the website, www.utopiaisdbond.com. You can take your appraisal and you can look at these numbers right up here. And you can put those numbers into the calculator. We actually have 5 computers here tonight. If you would like to come up here, I'm happy to help you. And if we can get them online, we can actually calculate if you brought your appraisal values for 2023. Remember, you're not going to pay the 50 cents on this year. But we can give you an idea of what your taxes would have looked like. Then the other thing is your tax statement from 2022. You put that number in for the amount that you paid. See here, you can see Bandera County, RAGD, Utopia ISD, County Road, Special Road, Bandera County, Utopia Vanderpool, ESD. Only thing you're worried about is Utopia ISD, right there. That's the number that you'll put in. And the calculator will calculate how much it's going to cost you more or less per year and how much it's going to cost you more or less per month. This is what the calculator looks like. That's the website, and you can just go to www.utopiaisdbond.com, and then you can click on the tax calculator, and it'll bring it up. You don't have to remember tax dash calculator. Agriculture is the other big one in Utopia ISD. There are all kinds of agriculture. There's improved pasture, there's irrigated fields, there's non-irrigated fields, but the largest category in Utopia ISD is native pasture. Doesn't matter what your value is market-wise. If it's valued at $25,000, $30,000, $40,000, if you have an agricultural exemption, you're taxed on $67 an acre. So you can see here, last year, somebody with 50 acres paid $29.63 for the year. Next, or with the 50 cents and the 0.6692, if we were going to do it this year, that individual would be paying $39.17 for the year, for a total increase of $9.53 for the year, or 79 cents a month. Obviously, we put these in here at different increments, so if you have 400 acres, double that number. And that's your agricultural. Obviously, if you have irrigated fields, it's a different value. If you have wildlife exemption, different value. But this is the largest one. 65 and older. Doesn't matter what your value is. Doesn't matter what the rate is. You go back and you look at that number right there. You can never pay more than that number. It can go down, but it can never go up. Even with the interest and sinking. Makes no difference. Now there's a couple of things. Number one, you have to be 65 or older. Somebody in the household has to be 65 or older. And you have to go to the appraisal district and file the form to get that exemption. So this year, if your appraisal, even if your appraisal went up, if the rate goes down and you get the homestead exemption, it is very likely that your bottom dollar may go down. If it goes down this year, you're locked in at that rate. If it goes up, you're still locked in at what you had last year. Okay? It's the dollar amount. Okay? But you must apply for the exemption. All right? This is a sample ballot. This is what it's going to look like. On the ballot, state law requires that the ballot must read, this is a property tax increase. That came in a few years ago. State of Texas said, we do not want you putting this on there and saying that your taxes are going to go down. So that wording has to be on there. As we've shown you tonight, though, that does not necessarily mean that your bottom dollar will go up. It may go down. Okay? That was adopted in 2019. Master planning. So what is this bond for? Number one, we've talked about this a lot, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. New building is number one, and demolish the old building. The idea is to build a new facility while the old facility is still being utilized, just as it currently is. Yes, there were some drawings made. Yes, there were some footprints that were looked at, but none of that is set in stone. It was simply to find out how many square feet do we need and how much is it going to take up on a piece of property. That's all. If the bond were to pass, all of that's back on the table. What's that building going to ultimately look like? What is going to be included in that building? There were a lot of things that were included in the building. Number one, the cafeteria, the kitchen is undersized. That came from the independent consultant or the independent facility study. The cafeteria or the kitchen is too small for the number of children that we're serving. We don't have enough room to set up all the equipment in there, and we don't have enough equipment to be able to do all the things that we would like to do. So the kitchen needed to be bigger. The cafetorium it'll seat approximately 150 people. If a bunch of people stand up around the outside, we can get more in there. The new cafetorium was sized to hold comfortably 300 people. For community meetings, for one-act play, for banquets, for awards presentations, those types of things. The current stage was recommended, again by the facility study, that it's too small, it needs to be a full-size stage. So a full-size stage was put in there. We do not have a functional living facility at Utopia ISD. Functional living is for kiddos that are learning how to wash, dry, cook. In other words, fend for themselves. We do not have that facility at Utopia ISD. So there was a facility that was included in the new building, in the square footage. The art room, which is a portable, that is not part of the square footage for the main building, but it was included in the new building. The 2 classrooms in the resource building house our 5th and 6th grade. Some of you probably remember being up there, and they were the computer lab and the distance learning lab. Those 2 classes are now 5th and 6th grade. Those would move to the new building. That's not part of the footprint of the main building. So what are you going to put in the resource building? Well, technology is in a portable building in the back. It has not been condemned yet, but it's been around a while. And so we would put technology in that room where it's a classroom where we can teach technology. Our technology teacher has been doing a fantastic job. We have some graduates who have already called back and said, thank you so much. I'm so far ahead in college. I've gotten jobs, whatnot. But we want to make that a full program. That one of those classrooms would be used for that. Back in the day when you and I took agriculture, there wasn't any such thing as advanced animal science or vet med or things of that nature. We now have a pathway where we have an ag science teacher that teaches veterinary medication. They teach advanced animal science. They teach small animal science, equine science. Some of those courses require by the state of Texas, the TEKS, Texas Essential Knowledge and Skills, that 40% of that class should be taught in the lab. So the thought is to move that ag science teacher that teaches those courses into the other room that is in the resource building and use the science lab for that person and for the elementary. Because currently, pre-K through 4th, no, they don't use a lab very often, but it would be nice for them to be able to go in and use a lab facility so that when they spill things, it's in a room where it's designed for that type of thing. So, the science lab, ag science teacher, technology, move art to the main building, move 5th and 6th grade to the main building, increase the size of the cafeteria, increase the stage size, increase the kitchen, add a functional living, and lastly, a performing arts room. It would not be as big as a band hall, but it would be a little bit bigger than a classroom so that we could teach things like recorders in the elementary, maybe a few instruments, guitars, things of that nature, possibly some theater in that room, those types of things, which we don't have right now. So that's kind of why that main building is bigger, and then the class sizes would all be big enough so that every class would be able to hold or class room would be able to hold a maximum capacity size class of students, so that you would never be limited on where you go with the kids and who teaches in what room. The other thing is, it was kind of designed like the elementary. The elementary is probably the safest building we have. The way it's shaped, each classroom has a storage room. I hate it. It's a necessary evil. But kids if we have to have a lockdown, if we have an active shooter, those kids, if they can't escape and get out the back, They can get in that storage room, lock the door, and lock the outside class door, and when somebody comes around, they look in there, the room's dark, there's nobody in there, they move on. And plus it provides storage for every teacher. Counter space with cabinet space underneath. So every one of those classrooms is going to be bigger than the ones that are in the main building. Then, of course, once that's done, once it's constructed, once it's finished, then demolish the old main building. The contractors feel like they can do it very comfortably for $30 million. We have seen numbers as low as 25, and as high as 29, 30. So they feel like they can get those two things done, and we are very close to that number for bonding capacity. After that's done, there were several other things that were discussed. Lots of different things were brought up. Different people had different interests. From the committee that was looking at studies for students and career pathways, the CTE facility was very important. We got a $100,000 grant, and we bought a bunch of equipment for the welding shop. The welding shop is undersized. We can't use all of that equipment at one time. There's room in there for a couple of small projects. And the electricity, we don't have enough electricity in that building to be able to run all of that equipment. A lot of that equipment runs on what's called 3-phase. We've had to step it down to single phase. Therefore, it's not at its capacity, and it's not running like it should be or it's designed. So a CTE facility that would have a classroom and a welding shop that's big enough to accommodate all of that. And in the past, obviously, we have had tractor restoration.
Excuse me, Mr. Gary, what is CTE?
Career and technical education, I'm sorry. Yes, ma'am. Career and technical education. Those are the courses that we're trying to get certificates for the kids so that when they graduate, they can immediately go into the workforce. Renovate the old gym. The old gym was, the restrooms, the dressing rooms were basically abandoned after the new gym was built. The idea was brought up to possibly go in there and try to renovate the bathrooms, renovate the dressing facilities, make it where PE can use those, where the restrooms are able to be used by the little kiddos, and preserve the main gym and the floor so that it's not being used for PE. Right now, we have those kiddos take off their shoes, and we have socks for them to put on every day. We wash them every day, but they put on socks so that they're not tearing up the gym floor. Obviously, no heat and air. Yes, when I was a child, there was no heater or no air conditioning in the gym, but it's a very big deal these days. Parents want heat and air for the kiddos. It can get up to 115 in that gymnasium when we start out in August, and it can get very cool during the wintertime. So to kind of upgrade it, replace the lighting, new electrical system, upgrade the gym floor, take care of those types of things. And then there's other district-wide projects. I will give you tonight, there's some handouts from the facility study. It has a listing of some of the items that were of concern. One of them I included on there was the HVAC. You will see that some of our HVAC systems date all the way back to the 80s. Of course, the newest one was put in the new gym last year. The lifespan on those things is typically around 15 years of age. If you get 15 years out of one, you're doing very well. We're getting 30 plus years, 35 years out of some of those AC units. The thing is if a number of them go out at one time, we don't have the money in our maintenance and operations budget to be able to replace 7, 8, 9 air conditioners during the course of a year. Okay? So those were some of the other things that were brought up. Athletic facilities were brought up. Other maintenance projects were brought up. Just a plethora of items that were brought to the committee's attention. Obviously, This is our maximum capacity right now. The reason the board again said, let's go ahead and put this on there, we were told that, one of the committee members told us that, we could look at 2 to 3% construction cost increase per month. The contractors that we contacted, they were pretty conservative and said 1% per month. Well, if you get this done and you're saying, okay, well, let's go ahead and start planning on this one, be another 6, 7, 8 months before you even get to call for a bond, and then you're another 6, 8 months before you can actually start construction. Remember, the district can never take out more than what its bonding capacity is. So as this is paid off, then you gain some of that capacity back. So what does this look like as far as election goes? If you are not a registered voter, you have until October the 10th to register. If you are a registered voter, early voting begins on October the 23rd and is over on November the 3rd. All of the voting locations will be in the newspaper. They will be on the website. They will be advertised at the courthouses. Obviously, if you are early voting, you will need to go to the location where they have early voting. Then on November the 7th is the election day. Those locations will be published as well. Times will be published as well. And I believe we have a voting location here at the Senior Center, and there's one in Vanderpool for voting day. Now for early voting, those will not be open. But on election day, it will be open. As we proceed through these presentations, we will be updating utopiaisdbond.com. This video will be put on there. The slide presentation will be put on there. I have some handouts, some FAQs, or frequently asked questions that I've been asked by the board members, the committee members, the community members. As I've been getting those questions, if they appear several times, I've sat down and typed all of those up, the question and the answer. So you can refer back to this website, and those FAQs will be there for you to take a look at. We really appreciate you being here tonight. The people that are on the bond committee, obviously the school board is published on the website. Their contact information is on the website. They all have school emails. You know who they are, I think, for the most part. But these are the people that were on the bond committee. Once the facilities committee decided that a bond needed to be called, then a bond committee was put together, and there was more input that was brought to the table. So Carol Koch, Tony Cantu, Diane Causey, Julie Chambers, Kevin Chambers, Karen Heidemann, Tracy Hillis, Chad Hillis, Julia Missouri, Valerie Moore, Wayne Moore, Jody Rutherford, and Gina Smothers were all on that committee. They have seen this presentation 2 or 3 times now. They have adjusted it. They have told me, hey, you need to add this. You need to inform the people about this. There's going to be these types of questions. So a lot of those people are in the audience this evening. They're going to be in different parts of the room. I'm going to step aside over here. I'm happy to stay here till midnight answering questions for you, and I'll help you on the computers. I don't know if Mr. Carter made it back. Yes, Mr. Carter's over here. He'll hook the computers up to a hotspot so that you can put in your numbers if you would like to, and we'll answer questions as they're brought to us. Okay? So we're going to dismiss it and let you go to groups and ask your questions in groups instead of doing it all in one big group, because some people will sit here and they're like, I'm done, I need to leave. So, but we'll stay here and we'll visit with you. And Mr. Smothers, would you turn on the lights for us, please?
I'd rather ask questions here, so these other people may have, they may want to I think it would be fair if you let everybody stay here while we ask the questions.
Okay, well, I'd like to dismiss anybody that would like to, and I'll take a few minutes, but I'm not gonna keep everybody the whole time. Okay, so if there's some general questions, I'll answer 2 or 3 general questions. Yes, ma'am.
Can you speak to what would happen if the bond did not pass? What are the next steps?
There are no next steps.
Repeat the question so we can.
I'm sorry, what she asked, what if the bond does not pass? There are no absolute next steps. It would be back to the drawing board. There's a lot of options out there. It can be dropped, never brought up again. It can come back in at the next election and be put on the ballot for the next election. Yes, sir.
So, and you've got project number 1, $30 million. What is this construction schedule on that? Is this 2 years, 3 years? What does the draw schedule look like on that project?
We don't have a draw schedule at this time. We just need to find out how much it would be total. That's something that we look at.
What's the build time then?
Don't have an exact build time. We hope that we can start if the bond is passed. Again, the committee and the board was very insistent. There needs to be more input about what this building is going to look like. So if the bond is passed, then there'll be more input on as to what the building is going to look like. As soon as that input is done, then it has to go to the architect. They have to do the drawings. Maybe we can start in June, July.
My last question.
Yes, sir.
What's your projections for students in the next 5, 10 years? How many kids are we talking about?
We did not do a population study. We looked at about the last 25 years. In the last 25 years, we've had to increase capacity. We built the resource building, I believe it was 1996. We built the elementary in 2010. This building would facilitate approximately 300. But we did not do a formal population growth study. Yes, sir.
I only have one question that pertains to the demolition of the original building. You mentioned that there was asbestos value, okay, and you also mentioned that there was no way to estimate the time and the frame and everything like that. So how did you come about the numbers in doing that portion of it, the 30 million, if you don't have any idea what it's gonna cost to remediate that, or if there may be other biohazards in the building as you demolish it that you find that could take it into a 25-year project, or a hospital like they have in San Antonio that they just walked away from because it would cost too much money to demolish.
Those are all possibilities. The contractor that we visited with, they feel very comfortable. And your question was asked by the board and the committee, because when we started talking asbestos and 3 attics and what are we going to find in there, we don't know. They were very comfortable.
Did they give you a dollar figure?
They were very comfortable that they could get it done for 30, the new building, and demolish. Yes.
Some of that number in the 30 million includes a percentage of contingency.
Okay.
Right, so I think they were at 10 to 15% contingency. That percentage is money that, like, let's say 10% minus 30, right? That's their estimated value to protect.
Sure.
That extra percentage is for all the others. Right, so that's how they came up with that.
Yes, ma'am.
I have a question. Uvalde is in the process of building a school right now for $500 a square foot. Medina Valley is in the process of building a school right now for $420 a square foot. Your school up here, if you do the math, is $750 a square foot.
That takes into account for inflation. And again, I have to tell you, this is worst case scenario money-wise. It is very possible that this could come in for 24 million. But the board and the committee did not want to come to the voting public and say, well, we think we can get it for 24 million and we'll squeeze it in. And then that thing ends up costing 25 million, and we've got a bond that was approved for 24, and now we're $1 million short and we don't have enough in fund balance to complete the job. So this is worst case scenario. The board for Utopia Independent School District is very conservative. but they did not want to come to the public and promise the moon and not be able to deliver. So they wanted to estimate on the high side on the cost, and then we're gonna do everything we can to get it to come in much lower than that. Yes, sir.
Those, community you're talking about, are they gonna tear the whole school down and rebuild, or they just building a new
In
one?
Valley, they're buying 23 new acres, they're building a brand new school on it. In Medina Valley, they're not tearing down. If you look at that part, when you talk about tearing down this school, 20,000 square foot, that difference, that extra $250 a square foot would equate to $500 a square foot just to tear that school down.
Okay, a couple more questions and we're gonna break it off. Yes, sir.
Okay, so you talked a lot about the tax rate of the school going down whenever the valuations go up. But there was a chart showing that over the years, but I didn't see any actual numbers of the total tax revenue being brought in by the school. So if the tax rate's going down, but the valuations are going up, did the actual revenue stay relatively stable? Did it go up? I didn't see any total
It
numbers.
stays
on that.
relatively stable. We are able to collect more each year, but the state of Texas says you're allowed to have so many dollars per student. And then that gets into a weighted number. If the student is special education, if the student is in a career and technical education, then you get a little bit more money.
Right.
But you're only allowed to have so much money per student.
And just one two-part question. The second question is so like when the valuations go up, and do they try to lower it exactly where it stays stable, or do y'all get a little more revenue?
We get a little more revenue.
Okay.
Yes, we do. And they claim that they're increasing it for inflation, but the last numbers that we got, inflation was 14% and the revenue increase was 4%.
Okay.
So we're not keeping up with, it's like we went from 2 years ago, we were budgeting $30,000 for fuel. Last year, we budgeted $70,000 for fuel.
And it kind of related to that. So you show that, if for some people, their taxes might actually go down.
Yes, sir.
But that's predicated on the $100,000 homestead exemption.
You are correct.
Passing. But I didn't see a slide showing how much people's taxes would go down with that passing and the bond failing. So, in that case, it is a tax increase because if it's predicated on the $100,000 homestead exemption, then our taxes would be lowered that much. Essentially, what it's doing is erasing the raised homestead exemption.
What if the bond passes and the exemption doesn't?
Yes, and those are all scenarios that we don't know. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I don't know if, we have students enrolled that live outside the Utopia Independent School District, but I think we do, right?
Yes, sir.
What's the tax burden to those families?
As far as
bond.
on the bond, there is none. Yeah,
What is the percentage of students that we have that live outside UISD?
I would have to go look at the most recent numbers. I'm not 100% sure what the percentage is right now.
You know the number.
I don't have the number, and it changes daily depending on, we drop a couple of kids, add a couple of kids. Yeah, kids that live outside, we get the money from the state for that child. And those children, transfer students, they bring the state dollars with them, but we don't get extra tax revenue for them.